lecture series. I will be taking Matthew Arnold, who is a Victorian poet. Matthew Arnold is also prescribed in the syllabus of many university all over India, and also in the syllabus of Allahabad University semester 3. His two poems are prescribed, uh, Dover Beach and Memorial Verses. So let us discuss about his life. So Matthew Arnold was born on December 24, 1822 in Laleham, Middlesex, in England, and he died on April 15, 1888 in Liverpool, which is also in England. So he was an English poet of Victorian era, a literary scholar, social critic, uh, and he was famous for especially for his classical attack on the contemporary taste and manners of the barbarian, which is the aristocratic class, and Philistine, the commercial middle class, and the populace. He began the apostle of culture in such work as Culture and Anarchy, which was published in 1869. It is a highly critical work, and it is considered as a very good work in the field of English literature criticism. So, as per his life, he was the eldest son of the renowned Thomas Arnold, who was appointed headmaster of Rugby School in 1828. Matthew and Arnold entered rugby in 1837. There are many other poets who have also studied in rugby school. And then he attended Oxford as a scholar of Balliol College. There he won the Newdigate Prize with his poem Cromwell in 1843, and was graduated with second class honors in 1844. For Oxford, Arnold retained an impassionate affection. His Oxford was the Oxford of John Henry Newman, just about to be received into the Roman Catholic Church. And although Arnold owned religious thought like his father was strongly liberal, Oxford and Newman always remained for him joint symbol of spiritual beauty and culture. So in 1847, Arnold became private secretary to Lord Lansdowne, who occupied a high cabinet post during Lord John Russell's Liberal ministries. And in 1851, in order to secure the income needed for his marriage, which happened in June 1851 with Frances Lucy Whiteman, he accepted from Lansdowne an appointment as inspector of schools. This was to be his routine occupation until within 2 years of his death. So um, he died in 1888. So he engaged in incessant traveling throughout the British province, and also several times was sent by the government to inquire into the state of education in France, Germany, Holland, and Switzerland. Two of his reports on school abroad were reprinted as books, and his annual report on school at home attracted wide attention, written as they were in Arnold's own urban and civilized prose. So now let us discuss about his poetic achievement. He has written some very famous poem like Dover Beach. The work that gave Arnold his high place in the history of literature and the history of idea was all accomplished in the time he could spare from his official duty. So he was very busy during his doing his official duty, but still he had time for writing, and he wrote verses. Not only verses, but he also wrote criticism, and he wrote literary criticism as well as social criticism. So his first volume of verse was The Straight Traveller and Other Poem, uh, by published in 1849, and this was followed by another poem in 1852 by another under the same initial Empedocles on Etna and other poem, which was published in 1852. Then in 1853, his first volume of poem published under his own name. First, he has written as a pseudonym. It consisted partly of poems selected from his earlier work, and contained the well-known preface explaining why Empedocles And there were other things also. Then he explained why Empedocles was excluded from the selection, as it was a dramatic poem in which the suffering find no vent in action, in which there is everything to be endured, nothing to be done. Then the, the preface of the book foreshadow his later criticism in its insistence upon the classic virtue of unity, impersonality, universality, and architectonic power, and upon the value of the classical masterpieces as model for an age of spiritual discomfort, an age wanting it more grandeur. Other edition followed, and Mero Arnold classical tragedy appeared in 1858, a new poem published in 1867. After that date, though there were further addition, Arnold wrote little additional verse. He inclined towards criticism. Not much of Arnold verse will stand the test of his own criteria. Far from being classically poised, impersonal, serene, and grand, it is often intimate, personal, full of romantic regret, sentimental pessimism, and nostalgia. Like we can find this in Dover Beach also, which is a fine example of nostalgia, pessimism, and subjective element. As a public and social character and as a prose writer, Arnold was sunny, debonair, and sanguine, but beneath ran the current of his buried life, uh, and of this much of his poetry in the echo. From the soul subterranean depth unborn, I'm quoting some of his lines. From the soul subterranean depth unborn, as formed from an infinitely distant land, come airs and floating echoes and convey a melancholy into all our days. So these are the lines in one of his poem. Then I'm past 30, he wrote a friend in 1853, and three past eyes over. The impulse to write poetry came typically when, like I could, a bolt is shot back somewhere in the breast, and a lost pulse of feeling stir again. So, though he was never quite benumbed by the word's sway, these hours of insight became more and more rare, and the stirring of buried feeling were associated with mood of regret for lost youth, regret for the freshness of the early world, mood of self-pity, moods of longing for, like the two lines of his poem, the hills where his life rose and the sea where it goes. So, yet, though much of Arnold's most characteristic verse is in the vein of soliloquy or intimate confession, he can sometimes rise, as in Sorab and Rustam is his famous poem, to epic severity and impersonality, to lofty meditation, as in Dover Beach. Now, Dover Beach is prescribed in the syllabus of uh, many universities in all over India, and to sustain magnificence and richness, as in the scholar Gypsy and Thyresis, where the wild and intricate stanza form without a stumble. In 1857, assisted by the vote of his godfather and predecessor John Cabell, uh, Arnold was elected to the Oxford Chair of Poetry, which he held for 10 years. Means in his lifetime he has occupied various posts, academic posts, as well as literary posts in various departments. It was characteristic of him that he revolutionized this professorship. The keynote was struck in his inaugural lecture on the modern element in literature, modern being taken to mean not merely contemporary, for Greece was, for like the lines are, for Greece was modern, but the spirit that contemplating the vast and the complex spectacle of life craze for moral and intellectual deliverance. So, several of his lectures were afterward published as critical essays. He used to give lecture, and all these lectures were documented and published as critical essays. But the most substantial fruit of his professorship were the three lectures on translating Homer. So, this was his monumental work published in 1861, in which he recommended Homer's plainness and nobility as medicine for the modern world, which its sick, hurry, and divided aims, and condemned Francis Newman recent translation as ignoble and eccentric, and the lecture on the study of Celtic literature, published in 1867, in which, without much knowledge of his subject or of anthropology, he used the Celtic strain as a symbol of that which reject the despotism of commonplace and the utilitarian. So Arnold, being a Victorian poet, was realist, and we all know that Romantic and Victorian age belong to 19th century. Half of the 19th century was Romantic and half Victorian, and these two period have a different characteristic. Like Romantics poet, they had um, a different school. They belong to the different school of thought, like school art for art's sake. They believe in art for art's sake, but so they were called as escapist because they had not shown the reality, the real picture of the era of the situation existing during their age in their poetry. But the Victorians are called as realist. They believe in another school of thought, and that is art for social change or art for utilitarian. And they have shown the real picture of Victorian society in their writing, so they are called as realist. And there are some very remarkable poem written during uh, Victorian age. Arnold died suddenly in 1888 of heart failure while running to meet a tram that would have taken him to the Liverpool landing stage to see his daughter, who was visiting from the United States, where he had moved after marrying an American, uh, where she has moved uh, after marrying an American. His wife died in June 1901. So, Matthew Arnold, in the contemporary age, is considered as one of the greatest poet of English literature. And though Wordsworth is more famous, but Arnold is also very famous around the world, and especially in India. So there are some books on. There are some poetry collection on of by Arnold, and that is stanza in memory of the author of Obermann, 1849, The State Reveller, another poem, 1849, Memorial Verses to Wordsworth, 1850, Empedocles to Etna, another poem, 1852, Sohrab and Rustam, 1853, The Scholar Gypsy, 1853, Stanza from the Grandeur Chartiers, 1855, Rugby Chapel, 1867. Thank you, Archana. Thyresis, 1865. Then prose include Essay in Criticism, published 1865, and then again the second edition in 1888, on the study of Celtic literature, 1867, Culture and Anarchy, 1869, Friendship Garland in 1871, Literature and Dogma, 1873, God and the Bible, 1875, and the study of poetry in 18. So he was also a great critic. I will be discussing about Arnold as a critic in my future lecture. There is uh, Anurag Mishra, Acharya Anurag Mishra. Hello, thank you. Uh, Hello, Anurag. Hope you are fine. So, I hope I have discussed in detail about Arnold, and I will be discussing other poet soon. But tomorrow, I will be discussing a Indian poem, Sea Breeze. So, or I will be discussing about the poet first. So, I hope today's lecture is clear. Thank you, everyone.